Good day everyone, we are the Group 4 and today's topic is all about the parts of the brain. But before we go further on our topic, let us first define what is a human brain and its purpose or function to our body. The human brain. The brain is the most complex part of the human body. This 3-pound organ is the seat of intelligence, interpreter of the senses, initiator of body movement, and controller of behavior. Lying in its bony shell and washed by protected fluid, the brain is the source of all the qualities that define our humanity. As we all know, the brain is one of the most important part of the body because most of the function of the brain is to regulate the movement of our body. Mostly of us already know that our brain is divided into 3 main parts, which is the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brainstem. And the first main part of the human brain is the cerebrum. So let's define what is all about the cerebrum and its function. The cerebrum. Cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is composed of right and left hemispheres. It performs higher function like interpreting touch, vision and hearing, as well as speech, reasoning, emotion, learning, and fine control of movement. As we can see on the picture that the cerebrum is the largest part of our brain. Therefore, cerebrum have the most number of function among all the other 2 main remaining part of the brain. Next to cerebrum is cerebellum. So let's define what is all about the cerebellum. The cerebellum, or also known as little brain, is located under the cerebrum. Its function is to coordinate muscle movements, maintain posture, and balance. So all in all, we can conclude that cerebellum function is all about the physical posture and movements of our body. So the third main part of our brain is the brainstem. Brainstem acts as a relay center connecting the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. It performs many automatic functions such as breathing, heart rate, body temperature, wake and sleep cycles, digestion, sneezing, coughing, vomiting, and swallowing. The brainstem also have 3 main parts, which is the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. The brainstem is the smallest part of our brain compared to cerebrum and cerebellum, but even it is considered as the smallest of all among the part of our brain, it is still very important since this is the one who connects the cerebrum and cerebellum to our spinal cord. It also have different function on our body. And just like what I have mentioned earlier, that the brainstem includes the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. So first, let's talk about the midbrain. The midbrain is a very complex structure with a range of different neuron clusters, neural pathways, and other structures. These features facilitate various functions such as hearing and movement to calculating responses and environmental changes. The midbrain also contains the substantia nigra, unaffected by Parkinson's disease, that is rich in dopamine neurons and parts of basal ganglia, which enables movement and coordination. The second part of the brainstem is the pons. The pons is the origin for 4 of the 12 cranial nerves, which enable a range of activities such as reproduction, chewing, blinking, focusing vision, balance, hearing, and facial expression. Named for the Latin word for bridge, the pons is the connection between the midbrain and the medulla. Therefore, we can conclude that the pons is like a brainstem that serves as a connection of 2 other parts. So the third part of the brainstem is the medulla. At the bottom of the brainstem, the medulla is where the brain meets the spinal cord. The medulla is essential to survival. Function of medulla regulate bodily activities, including heart rhythm, breathing, blood flow, and oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. The medulla produces reflexive activities such as sneezing, vomiting, coughing, and swallowing. As I've mentioned earlier, the cerebrum is divided into two halves or hemisphere, which is the right and the left hemispheres of the human brain. The right and the left hemisphere. So the right and the left hemisphere are joined by a bundle of fibers called corpus callosum that transmit messages from one side to other side. So, the corpus callosum is like a bridge for the right and the left part of our brain when it comes to exchanging messages. Each hemisphere controls the opposite side of the body. So, if a stroke occurs on the right side of our brain, your left arm or leg may be weak or paralyzed. But take note that not all functions of hemisphere are shared with each other. So let's see what is all about the right hemisphere and its function. The right hemisphere. The right brain is more visual and intuitive. It's sometimes referred to as the analog brain. It has a more creative and less organized way of thinking. And according to its very stated, research suggests that the brain is also connected to imagination, holistic thinking, intuition, arts, rhythm, nonverbal cues, feelings, visualization, and daydreaming. So therefore, we can conclude that the right hemisphere function is more on being imaginative, artistic, and more on visualization. So next is the left hemisphere. The left brain is more verbal, analytical, and orderly than the right brain. It's sometimes called the digital brain. It's better at things like reading, writing, and computations. And according to its various dated research, the left brain is also connected to logic, sequencing, linear thinking, mathematics, facts, and thinking in words. Compared to the right brain, the left brain is more on being analytical. So this is a visual representation of the right and the left hemispheres of the brain and its function.
Next is the lobes of the human brain: the frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes.
The lobes of the human brain. The cerebral hemisphere have distinct fissures which divide the brain into lobes. Each hemisphere has 4 lobes, which is the frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital. Each lobe may be divided once again into areas that serve very specific functions. It's important to understand that each lobe of the brain does not function alone. There are very complex relationships between the lobes of the brain and between the right and left hemispheres. Additionally, each of the hemispheres has been divided into 4 lobes. Although we now know that most brain function rely on many different regions across the entire brain working in conjunction, it is still true that each lobe carries out the bulk of certain functions. The frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the largest lobe of the brain, located in the front of the head. The frontal lobe is involved in personality characteristics, decision-making, and movement. Recognition of the smell usually involves parts of the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe contains Broca's area, which is associated with speech ability. The frontal lobe is important for cognitive functions and control of voluntary movement or activity. It is the most anterior front part of the brain. It extends from the area behind the forehead back to the precentral gyrus. As a whole, the frontal lobe is responsible for higher cognitive functions such as personality characteristics and decision-making and movement. Parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is the middle part of the brain. The parietal lobe helps a person identify objects and understand spatial relationships where one's body is compared with objects around the person. The parietal lobe is also involved in interpreting pain and touch in the body. The parietal lobe houses Wernicke area, which helps the brain understand spoken language. Parietal lobe processes sensory information it receives from the outside world, mainly relating to interpreting pain and touch. Occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is the back part of the brain that is involved with vision. Occipital lobe is the smallest of the four lobes of the cerebral hemisphere that is involved with vision. Temporal lobe. The sides of brain. Temporal lobes are involved in short-term memory, speech, musical rhythm, and some degree of smell recognition. Temporal lobe, it plays a role in visual and sound processing and is crucial for both object recognition and language recognition.
So next is language. In general, the left hemisphere of the brain is responsible for language and speech, and it's called the dominant hemisphere. The right hemisphere plays a large part in interpreting visual information and spatial processing. In about one-third of people who are left-handed, speech functions may be located on the right sides of the brain. Left-handed people may need spatial testing to determine if their speech center is on the left or right sides prior to any surgery in the area. So, many neuroscientists believe that the left hemisphere and perhaps other portions of the brains are important in language. Aphasia is simply a disturbance of language. Certain parts of the brain are responsible for specific functions in language productions. There are many types of aphasias, each depending upon the brain area that is affected and the role that area plays in language production. There are several areas of the brain that play a critical role in the speech and language. These are the Broca area and Wernicke area. This is the example picture of Broca area and Wernicke area. Broca's area. Broca's area, located in the left hemisphere, is associated with speech production and articulations, our ability to articulate ideas, as well as use words accurately in spoken and in written language has been attributed to this crucial area. Broca's area is also known as the motor speech area. It is near to the motor cortex and utilized in speech production. Located in the inferior frontal gyrus, this area regulates breathing patterns, word speaking, and vocalizations required for normal speech. It coordinates the activity of the muscle of respiration, the larynx and pharynx, as well as those of the cheeks, lips, gums, and tongue. If a person has damaged the Broca's area, sounds can be made, but words can be formed. Wernicke's area is a critical language area in the posterior superior temporal lobe. Connects to Broca's area via a neutral pathway. Wernicke's area is primarily involved in the comprehensions. Historically, this area has been associated with language processing, whether it the written or spoken. Wernicke's area is close to the auditory cortex and located in the superior temporal gyrus. It is associated with language comprehension, receiving information from the sensory associations areas. It is important in a person's personality since it integrates sensory information and coordinates the access to auditory and visual memories. Conclusion: our brain is one of the most complex part of our body. Its function is to control thought memory, emotion, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, and every process that regulates our body. So, if any parts of our brain will be damaged, the other parts of our body will also be affected. Since most of the functions of our brains is to regulate our body.